The term dream home means something a little different to everyone. The search for the perfect place to live brought Bryan Beaulieu to the Arizona desert. But his dream home didn't exist. He had to build it, or should I say, invent it. Today, we've asked engineer and inventor Bryan Beaulieu to show us around his property and tell us how he turned his dream into a reality. I've been looking around, but I can't seem to find the front door to this place. I hope it's okay if I go through this gate. Hey, Bryan. I finally found you. I wasn't sure I would. I couldn't find the front door.
Hi, Pete. Welcome to my office.
You know, your house is so unusual. Everything's so out in the open, I almost feel like I'm in a tree house. How'd all this get started?
Well, when we moved to the desert, we thought, well, we should connect with the desert as much as possible. The house we moved into was kind of this hermetically sealed box, and we didn't get to smell the breezes or see the cactus or listen to the birds. So we thought, let's build a place where you could be part of the desert as much as possible. So this is the office. It's also our multimedia room. It's also our outdoor living room. And this is way better than anything I could build that would be inside.
Of course, you got a great site being here on the mountain with all these boulders, and you kind of got little pods all over the place.
Right. Well, the mountain was a challenge because it's, of course, uphill, and so we couldn't put one flat structure. So we staggered these modules up the hill, and that allows us to intertwine with the boulders and be part of the environment.
It's much more sensitive to the site than coming in here and trying to blade everything to even a couple of levels. You just kind of worked in between everything.
Right. Well, it made it more difficult to build, but it's got much more character to it and texture. So we tried to choose materials that were compatible with the desert. We found a rusty can on the site, and we said, that's the color that the steel should be. So we rusted all the steel and allowed that to weather. And then we went around the world to see, well, how do people live without a lot of energy? And we thought, well, in the Mediterranean, you're living under grapevines all the time. There are restaurants just covered with grapevines. In Greece, you're living in cave homes. In Bali, all the structures are separate. Your living room is separate from your kitchen, and your bedrooms are separate. So we just took places from around the world and said, this is a comfortable place to live.
Well, you know, a lot of the old world civilizations had to live with what they had. They didn't have the conveniences we have today, and you're kind of doing that same thing.
Right. Well, the development's named Tucson. That's named after the ruins at the Grand Canyon of the Anasazi. And we started researching the Anasazi and how they lived on the south side of the mountain, and they could get the sunlight, and then saw, well, why did they leave? And it was because they ran out of firewood, so we're powered by the sun, and the structures are Navajo-Hogan shaped. So we took a lot from the ancient civilizations.
Get some great breezes going through here, too.
The mountain acts like a solar chimney. The hotter the day, the stronger the breezes. So we have the opportunity to collect those breezes and funnel them where we're living.
So different times of the day, we get cool air that settles down and warm air that's going up.
Right. We worked for 4 years designing this house before we started building it. And in the mornings, the breezes, like you say, come down the mountain. In the afternoons, they come up the mountain. So we have waterfalls positioned at different places to cool those breezes as they go past us.
So you're using solar energy, and you're also using kind of some passive.
Right. The house uses what they call thermal mass. Everything is very heavy. Our walls are all solid concrete. We put our solid materials on the inside of our insulated space. So typically you'll put your bricks on the outside of the house. We put our bricks on the inside of the house.
Well, you know, our show is mostly about outside, but I think we need to step inside and take a look at some of the interior features of your wonderful home.
Great, let's go.
Okay. Bryan, this room is so beautiful with all this glass. You've really got that indoor-outdoor feel going. Great views of the city and the mountain. Why don't you tell me a little bit about the structures?
Well, we wanted to make a indoor structure that allows us to communicate visually outside and also feel the breezes. So this is based on a Navajo-Hogan design, 6-sided structure, earth-covered, pyramidal roof, vents to the outside, and then make it out of materials that make you feel better, that aren't giving you VOCs or having glue smells or formaldehyde. So we chose materials that were very simple: limestone for the counters and floors, clay for the interior surfaces, just natural rusted steel for all the steel work, and then try to keep the woodwork so we don't have to have any stains or paint. So the wood is coated with vinegar and steel wool. We have natural materials and as much ventilation as we can get.
So what do you do for cooling?
Well, we have plastic tubes that have cool water that goes through the ceiling. And that cools the ceiling. Hot air rises, hits that cool ceiling, comes back down, and creates a natural convection cycle.
How do you cool the water?
Well, we have several means. We can even use pool water, which is cooler most of the year, or we can use a small chiller, like a water chiller, and cool it that way, or use cooling towers.
This is fascinating stuff. Mind if we stick around a little longer?
Sure.
We're here at the Beaulieu house. We've already looked at some of the things that make this home environmentally friendly, but there's a lot more to see. So Bryan, you've also installed a green roof on your house here. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, the idea was to have an environment that was as cool as possible, so we plant the roofs with a material that will reflect the heat or use that solar energy to grow plant material. So our house hopefully will get better every year. Another 50 years, this is going to look fabulous.
So how thick of soil do you have on there?
We have 2 feet of dirt. That's roughly 500 pounds per square foot of loading. That requires a very heavy structure to support that weight, but that also gives us the thermal mass, which helps us keep us cool.
Now I see you have mostly desert plants up there. I see Dahlia greggii and I see brittle bush. Where did you come up with your plant scheme?
Well, the gardeners that put in the plants initially thought they were going to have a very manicured environment, so we planted ice plants, and we tried different plants on each roof to see which one worked best to keep the structures cool, which lived longer, which worked better with the gray water. But then the desert started blowing in all these native plants, and we thought, well, that looks pretty interesting.
So that's where the brittle bush came from.
Everything that's not an ice plant has been blown in by the desert.
Now, how do you irrigate that?
Well, we have all the sinks and showers, other than the black water, runs down to a cistern, and then we have pumps that pump it up into 10 irrigation zones.
Now, and those are drip systems then?
Those are drip systems. As the water drips through the soil, it gets filtered, and when it gets back down to the cistern, we have basically purified water.
I would imagine that would also help cool the roof then.
Right, it does. Every time we irrigate, it's like when you pump water onto a lawn, it's cooling your front yard, but it's not doing you any good. With our roofs, every time we put water on it, we get that evaporative cooling effect.
Now, you also did a lot of other things to help cool this area down.
Right. We had 3 criteria that we were looking at. One is shade. So that's what you see. All these plants are providing us with shade. That's the #1 thing in the desert. The other is thermal mass. Can you build something heavy enough so it doesn't take a lot of energy to heat and cool? And the other is, can we connect with the desert as much as possible? Can we feel the breezes? And then, is everything as healthy as possible? Can we eliminate the things that are causing health issues?
Well, I noticed with the breezes, because you have all these separate structures with what we would even call breezeways in between them.
That's right. If you put 2 spaces together that form a funnel, then you can create these winds where you want them to be. So the spaces between the buildings are more important than the buildings ourselves, because you're interacting with these breezes.
Now, you also have some photovoltaics here?
That's right. We have 9,000 watts of photovoltaics. They're on angle collectors that allow us to adjust the angle for the season. And we can provide all the power for this house most of the times with those photovoltaics.
Well, Bryan, I see you've also used a lot of water features.
Right. We use a little more water than traditionally you'd like to see in an environment where you're worried about evaporation. But because we live in these outdoor environments so much, that we decided to have waterfalls positioned strategically, so as the breezes are going past the waterfalls, it's keeping us cooler. It's cooling that outdoor space. Plus the river, the stream that goes around the living spaces just naturally makes you feel more comfortable even if it's warm outside.
And I thought I saw a pond in the carport.
There's a gray water pond in the carport. We're growing koi there, eventually tilapia, and they eat the algae, and hopefully then we'll eat the tilapia. Pete, there's one more area I'd like to show you.
Great. Let's go take a look.
Okay. Pete, I'd like to show you one of my favorite parts of the house. This is the space between the bedrooms and the kitchen. It's based off a hotel room we stayed in Rome, where you'd go over under this vine-covered walkway with glass panels, and there's water around, and we thought if every morning when we got up, when we came down to breakfast, we could have that kind of adventure that we had in Rome, that would be the ideal luxury home.
So this is like your hallway. I really love your wallpaper. It looks like in a little while we'll be able to pick some grapes here.
Well, within a few weeks, we're going to have thousands of grapes that we can enjoy.
Well, Bryan, I really appreciate you giving us the tour today and giving us some insight in what it's like to live green.
You're welcome, Pete. I enjoyed the visit.
The Beaulieu home is full of innovative ways to lead a healthy and environmentally sensible life. And it gives us some insight into what our own homes may be like in the future.